The chemical bath smelled of bitter almonds and regret. It was a scent Elias Thorne knew better than his own skin. Here in the bruised red gloom of his dark room, time warped, seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into prayers that went unanswered. The only light came from the safe light's bloody eye, painting the shallow trays, the hanging clips, and his own pale hands in shades of arterial red. He was not developing a portrait. He hadn't pointed his camera at a living soul in 3 years, not since the boy with the kite. No, this was a landscape, a stark, lonely shot of the salt marshes at dawn, all skeletal reeds and mist clinging to the water like a shroud. A safe picture, an empty picture. He slid the tongs into the developer, lifting the 8x10 sheet of paper. Its surface was a milky, featureless white. He submerged it again, rocking the tray with a practiced, gentle motion. 1, 2, 3. His breath hitched in his throat, a tiny, snagged thing. The magic was beginning. The alchemy of silver halides and light. A gray smudge appeared, then another. The faint outline of the horizon bled into existence, a ghost arriving at its own wake. This was the part he dreaded, the watching, the waiting. He wasn't looking for the reeds or the water. He was hunting for ghosts. His gaze darted across the emerging image, a frantic search party in the monochrome twilight. The water darkened, the sky lightened, the details sharpening with agonizing slowness. It was a beautiful shot, technically perfect. The composition was balanced, the tonal range exquisite. In another life, he would have been proud. In this one, technical perfection was a canvas for horror. He leaned closer, the acidic tang of the stop bath stinging his nostrils. His heart hammered a frantic, muffled rhythm against his ribs. It was there. Tucked in the lower right corner, nestled between 2 blades of marsh grass, almost lost in the deep shadows of the foreground, a face. It wasn't a trick of the light, not pareidolia's cruel joke. It was a face, impossibly clear, impossibly small. A child's face, tilted slightly, with wide, dark eyes that seemed to stare right through the paper, through the chemical bath, and into him, the boy with the kite. Leo, his name was Leo. Elias remembered the gap-toothed grin, the constellation of freckles across his nose. There was no grin now. The expression in the photograph was one of solemn, placid stillness. He was watching. A low sound escaped Elias' throat, a strangled gasp that was swallowed by the hum of the ventilation fan. He snatched the print with the tongs, his hand shaking so violently that the paper slipped, splashing developer onto his wrist. It stung like a fresh burn. He plunged the print into the stop bath, the chemical hiss sounding like a final, dying breath. Then into the fixer to make the nightmare permanent. He clipped the dripping print to the line overhead. The face of the boy, no bigger than his thumbnail, stared down at him from a place he had never been. The salt marsh was 50 miles from the city park where Elias had taken Leo's photograph. He'd been alone that morning with only the gulls for company. Yet here was the proof. Leo had been there too. A silent passenger in his lens, a spectral stowaway in the camera's dark heart. Leo had vanished 11 months ago, just like the others. 23 people, captured by his lens, erased from the world within a year. And then, they returned. Not in flesh, but in silver and light. They appeared as tiny, perfect apparitions in the backgrounds of other photos, bystanders in moments they had never witnessed. A lost lover's smile reflected in a stranger's window. A missing musician's mournful eyes in the grain of an oak tree. And now, a dead child in the reeds of a lonely marsh. They were a silent, scattered congregation, and he was their unwilling documentarian. His camera, his cursed Voigtländer, was their trap, and his darkroom was their mausoleum. It began with Sarah. Of course it began with her. The memory was a photograph he could never undevelop, permanently fixed in his mind. They were in his old studio, the one with the big north-facing window that flooded the room with soft, forgiving light. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a cascade of dark hair spilling over the worn velvet of the chaise lounge. He was trying to capture it, that fleeting, uninhibited joy. He'd inherited the Voigtländer from his grandfather, a war correspondent who had seen too much. The camera felt heavy in his hands, a solid piece of German engineering, all brass and leather and cold, unforgiving glass. It felt significant. "Hold still," Head murmured, peering through the viewfinder, the world flattened, becoming a perfect, silent composition. Her laugh was a memory even as it was happening. "I can't," Shed giggled. "You're making that face again. The serious artist face." He smiled, his eyes still pressed to the camera. "This is serious art." The shutter clicked, a sound as precise and final as a closing lock. It was a good shot. More than good. It was her. He had caught her essence, the bright, burning filament of her soul, and trapped it in a 1/60th of a second. 6 months later, she was gone. At first, it was just a mystery. Shed left her apartment, gone for a walk, and never come back. No note, no signs of a struggle. The police had questions, of course. He was the boyfriend, the last one to see her. He showed them the photograph, the last one ever taken of her. Seahead said, his voice hollow. She was happy. The detective had looked at the print, then at him, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. The grief was a physical thing, a weight that settled in his bones. He put her picture on his mantelpiece and tried to forget the sound of the shutter. A year passed, a slow, gray crawl of days. Had taken the Voigtländer out again, trying to find a reason to keep going, to find beauty in a world that had stolen hers. He went to the botanical gardens and took a close-up of a dew-kissed orchid, its petals a delicate, waxy white. Back in the darkroom, under the same crimson light, he watched the flower emerge from the paper. And then he saw it. Reflected in a single, perfect droplet of water on one of the petals was Sarah's face. Not the laughing face from his studio, but a calm, serene expression, her eyes closed as if in sleep. It was microscopic, a detail he would have missed if he hadn't been staring, if he hadn't been desperately looking for her in everything. He thought he was going mad, his grief projecting her image onto the world. He printed it again, larger, pushing the enlarger to its limit. The grain was coarse, but the face was undeniably hers. His heart seized. It wasn't a memory, it was a haunting. Then came the others. A street performer named Marcus, whose soulful saxophone solos had stopped him in his tracks. Elias had taken his picture, a gritty black and white portrait, and had given him a $20 bill. 8 months later, Marcus vanished from his usual corner. A few weeks after that, his mournful eyes appeared in the gnarled bark of a tree Elias photographed in an old cemetery. An elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, who tended the most beautiful roses on his street. A quick, candid shot. She disappeared 5 months later. He found her profile, delicate and wrinkled, in the reflection on a polished hubcap in a photo of an abandoned car. The pattern became undeniable, a cold, statistical certainty that chilled him to the marrow. Take a person's photograph with the Voigtländer, and they were marked. They had 1 year, give or take a month, then they would be gone from the world, only to reappear as spectral echoes in the light he captured after. He was a reaper with a rangefinder. Each click of the shutter was a death sentence he didn't know he was passing. The guilt was an acid, eating him from the inside out. He sold his studio, abandoned his career, and locked himself away in his house, turning the basement into this red-lit purgatory. He had to stop, he had to, so he photographed landscapes, empty rooms, still lifes, safe things, but they weren't safe. The camera was hungry, and it was showing him its larder. His life shrank to the dimensions of his house. The world outside the windows became a landscape he could only observe, never capture. He was a prisoner of his own curse, his only companions, the 23 faces he kept filed away in a heavy, light-proof archival box. He knew them all by name, by the date he had photographed them, by the date they had vanished. Sarah, Marcus, Mrs. Gable, a barista, a librarian, a tourist who'd asked for directions. Leo, the boy with the kite, had fought the urge to photograph the boy. He'd seen him in the park, a flash of red from the kite against a brilliant blue sky, a study in primary-colored joy. The artist in him, the ghost of the man he used to be, screamed to capture it. He resisted for an hour, washing from a bench, his hands sweating. But the Voigtländer was in his bag, a cold, heavy weight. It seemed to whisper to him, promising to make the moment immortal. Just one picture, a child's joy. What harm could it do? Maybe the curse had lifted. Maybe it was all a terrible coincidence. He'd raised the camera. Head focused, head clicked the shutter, and he had damned the boy. Now, his days were a ritual of obsessive paranoia. He spent hours online cross-referencing news reports of missing persons with the faces in his box, confirming his grim tally. He devoured books on occult photography, spirit photography, the Curlian effect, anything that might offer a clue. He read about the concept of the camera obscura not just as a darkroom, but as a soul-stealing chamber. Most of it was nonsense, Victorian pseudoscience and parlor tricks. But somewhere in the esoteric ramblings about ectoplasm and silver nitrate, he felt a sliver of terrifying truth. The Voigtländer wasn't just capturing light, it was siphoning something else. He began to experiment. He took pictures of empty chairs, hoping to see a ghost sitting there. He photographed mirrors, searching for a face other than his own haunted reflection. Nothing. The apparitions only appeared in photos taken after a subject had vanished. They were echoes, not active spirits. Then the phenomena escalated. He took a photo of his own bookshelf, a mundane subject. When he developed it, the titles on the spines of the books were rearranged. They spelled out a sentence, "We are in the dark." He dropped the print, his blood turning to ice. He checked the bookshelf. The books were in their normal order. It was only in the photograph they were communicating, or something was communicating through them. He took another picture, this time of the peeling paint on his back door. In the developed print, the cracks and chips formed the shape of a hand reaching out. A week later, he photographed a rain-swept street through his living room window. In the reflection on a puddle, Marcus, the saxophonist, was there, but this time his mouth was open, as if in a silent scream. The terror was no longer passive, it was active. The ghosts in his machine were growing restless. He felt their collective gaze on him, a constant, silent pressure from the archival box in the corner. 23 pairs of eyes, watching him from their paper prison. He started talking to them, his whispers swallowed by the silence of the house. "What do you want from me?" had asked the box. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." The only answer was the faint rustle of the prints as the house settled, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a tombstone. He was coming undone, his sanity fraying like an old cloth. He stopped answering the phone, ignored the mail piling up by the door. His world was the red light, the chemical stench, and the faces. Always the faces. He was the curator of a gallery of the lost, and the collection was growing more demanding. The knocking on his front door was so loud it felt like a physical assault. 3 sharp, insistent raps that vibrated through the floorboards and up his spine. Elias froze, a half-eaten piece of toast halfway to his mouth. No one knocked on his door. Had made sure of that. The overgrown lawn was a deterrent, the permanently drawn curtains a warning. Bang, 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 louder this time. Impatient, he imagined the police. Had someone finally connected him to all the disappearances? A cold dread washed over him. He crept to the door, his heart a frantic bird in his chest, and peered through the peephole. A woman stood on his porch. She was tall, with a sharp, intelligent face framed by a no-nonsense dark bob. She wore a trench coat, and a reporter's notebook was clutched in one hand. She looked determined, annoyed. He didn't know her. "Mr. Thorne," her voice called out, muffled by the door. "Elias Thorne, I know you're in there. I'm Lena Petrova. I'm a journalist with the Chronicle. I need to talk to you about Sarah Keyes." Sarah. The name was a punch to the gut. He stumbled back from the door, his breath catching in his throat. How did she know it had been years? "Please, Mr. Thorne, it's important." He remained silent, hoping she would give up and leave. He could hear her shifting her weight, the rustle of her coat. He held his breath. "I also want to talk to you about Marcus Vance," she said, her voice closer now, right by the mail slot. "And Agnes Gable. And Leo Miller. I have a list, Mr. Thorne. 23 names. They all have one thing in common besides being missing. You." His world tilted. She knew. She knew all of them. He felt a wave of nausea. He gripped the door frame to steady himself. This was it. The end. He slowly unbolted the locks. The click sounded deafeningly loud in the silent house. He opened the door a crack. Lena Petrova's gray eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Not the dishevelment of his clothes, the wildness in his eyes, or the stale, shut-in smell of his house. How he rasped, his voice raw from disuse. "Good old-fashioned police work and a source who thinks you're more than just tragically unlucky," she said, not unkindly. "May I come in?" He let her in, not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had no other choice. She stepped inside, her presence an intrusion of sharp, clean reality into his dusty, hermetic world. She took in the stacks of books, the mail on the floor, the faint scent of fixer that clung to everything. "They think you're a serial killer," she said, getting straight to the point. "A very clever one who knows how to make bodies disappear." "I don't think so. I think something else is going on." He led her into the living room, a museum of his former life. On the mantelpiece, the laughing portrait of Sarah still stood. Lena's eyes went right to it. "That's the last picture of her, isn't it?" He nodded numbly. "I took it." "You took pictures of all of them, didn't you? Shortly before they vanished?" "Yes." The word was a confession, a guilty plea. She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of pity and journalistic curiosity. "Mr. Thorne, what happened to these people?" How could he explain? How could he make her understand a truth that defied all logic? He started to stammer, talking about the camera, the curse, the faces in the other photos. He could see the disbelief hardening in her eyes, her professional sympathy curdling into suspicion. She thought he was insane, a man confessing to magic because he couldn't confess to murder. "Let me see it," she said, her voice firm. "The camera." He hesitated. It was like asking a leper to show you his sores. But he needed someone to believe him. He was drowning. He retrieved the Voigtländer from its case. It felt cold, dormant in his hands. He held it out to her. She didn't take it. She just looked at it, a beautiful, antique object. And the other photos, the ones with the faces. He led her to the basement, down into the red gloom. He switched on a normal light, and the room was suddenly just a shabby, chemical-stained workspace. He pulled out the archival box and laid the prints on his work table. The orchid with Sarah's face in the dewdrop, the tree with Marcus' eyes in the bark, the marsh with Leo's watchful gaze. Lena picked one up, holding it close to her face. She was silent for a long time. It's remarkable. Pareidolia can be very convincing. It's not pareidolia, he whispered, his voice desperate. It's them. They're trapped. She put the photo down, her face a mask of skepticism. Or you're a very skilled photo manipulator, creating a narrative to cover for something monstrous. She looked him in the eye. I need proof, Mr. Thorne, something I can't explain away. A terrible, reckless idea bloomed in the darkness of his mind. An idea born of pure desperation. He wanted to scream at her to run, to leave him to his ghosts. But another part of him, the part that was suffocating under the weight of his guilt, needed to be seen, to be believed. You want proof, he said, his voice trembling. He picked up the Voigtländer. The metal was frigid against his skin. His hands were shaking. I'll give you proof. He raised the camera, the viewfinder, a black, hungry eye. Lena's face was framed within it. Her expression shifted from suspicion to confusion, then to a dawning horror as she realized what he was about to do. Don't, she said, her voice low and sharp. She took a step back. It's the only way, he whispered, his own words sounding alien to him. The artist in him saw the perfect shot, the fear in her eyes, the stark lighting of the basement, the story of a lifetime captured in a single frame. The monster in him saw a way to prove his truth. His finger found the shutter release. It felt slick with sweat. The world narrowed to the small rectangle of the viewfinder, her face, her life. He pressed the button. The click of the shutter was the loudest sound he had ever heard. It was the crack of a breaking bone, the tolling of a bell, the sound of a door slamming shut on a world of possibility. In the flash of a second, he had proven his curse by passing it on. He had just condemned her to vanish. The silence that followed the click was heavier than any sound. It was a vacuum, pulling the air from the room, from his lungs. Lena stood frozen, her hand half raised as if to block the lens, an instant too late. Her face was pale, her gray eyes wide, with a mixture of shock and a terrifying, dawning comprehension. The journalistic skepticism had been shattered, replaced by the raw, primal fear of a person who has just felt the cold touch of the inexplicable. Elias lowered the camera. Its weight in his hands was immense, the weight of a life. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words tasting like ash. God, I am so sorry. He'd expected her to scream, to run, to call the police and brand him a lunatic or a monster. Instead, she slowly lowered her hand, her gaze fixed on him. The fear in her eyes was still there, but it was being overlaid by something else, something steely and analytical. The reporter was reasserting control. A year, she said, her voice a strained, quiet thing. You said they have a year. He nodded, unable to speak. The full gravity of his act was crashing down on him. He hadn't just taken a picture. He had started a clock. Her clock. What have you done? She breathed. The question not an accusation, but a genuine, terrified inquiry. And so, he told her everything. Not the stammered, panicked version from upstairs, but the whole, sordid, horrifying truth. He spoke for over an hour, the words pouring out of him in a torrent of guilt and grief. He told her about Sarah, about the orchid, about his growing catalog of the vanished. He showed her the bookshelf photo with its spectral message, the paint-chipped hand on the door. He confessed his weakness, his sin of taking Leo's picture. He laid his entire cursed existence bare on the stained work table of his darkroom. Lena listened, her expression unreadable. She walked around the darkroom, picking up the prints, examining them under the bare bulb, no longer dismissing them as tricks of light. She touched the cold metal of the enlarger, ran a finger through the faint dusting of chemical powder on a shelf. She was processing it, fitting the impossible into the logical framework of her world. When he finally fell silent, exhausted and hollowed out, she looked from the photograph of Leo in the marsh grass to the Voigtländer sitting on the table between them. This is insane, she said, but the words lacked conviction. She picked up the camera, holding it carefully, as if it were a venomous snake. Where did you get it? My grandfather, he said. He was a photojournalist, covered the Eastern Front in the 40s. Sieges, famines, death. He never talked about it. When he came back, he never took another picture. He put this in a trunk in his attic and left it there until he died. Lena turned the camera over in her hands. So it's seen things. Her voice was grim. It's documented suffering, and maybe it learned how. Suddenly, they were no longer a journalist and a suspected killer. They were two people bound by a terrible shared fate. His guilt and her sentence. Her life was now tied to his curse. "We have to fight it," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of its former strength. "There has to be a way to break it. A cause has an effect. A lock has a key." For the first time in years, Elias felt a flicker of something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something more primal, the instinct to struggle. He had been a passive, guilt-ridden curator of his curse. Lena was a fighter. She had been on the outside, looking in. Now, she was inside the trap with him, and she was already looking for the door. "What do we do?" he asked, the word feeling strange and momentous on his tongue. "We start with the source," she said, placing the Voigtländer back on the table with a decisive thud. "We investigate this camera like it's a crime scene. We find out where it's been, what it's done, we learn its history, and then," she looked at him, her eyes burning with a desperate fire, "we find a way to stop it before my time runs out." Their alliance began in the red-lit gloom of the dark room and spread outwards. Lena, with her reporter's tenacity, attacked the problem with a methodical fury Elias had never been capable of. His own research had been a guilt-fueled, aimless spiral into occultism. Hers was a targeted investigation. For her, it wasn't a curse, it was an unsolved case, and her own life was the deadline. They started with his grandfather's trunk, dragged down from the attic, smelling of mothballs and forgotten time. Inside, beneath yellowed uniforms and medals, they found his journals. The entries were written in a tight, spidery script, detailing the horrors he had witnessed through the Voigtländer's lens. He wrote of villages erased by famine, of soldiers frozen in the snow, of hollow-eyed refugees. He didn't write of a curse, but a theme emerged. He described the camera as having a cold hunger and a vulture's eye. In one chilling entry from the siege of Leningrad, he wrote, "I photograph the dying, and I feel as if the camera is eating their last light. I am no longer documenting, I am collecting." "He knew," Lena breathed, her finger tracing the faded ink. "Not the whole truth, maybe, but he sensed its nature. That's why he locked it away." Lena's journalistic contacts opened doors Elias had never known existed. They spoke to historians, camera collectors, even a paranormal debunker who listened to their story with thinly veiled contempt before admitting that certain objects, especially those present at moments of extreme trauma, were sometimes reported to hold a kind of emotional residue. As the months ticked by, a horrifying theory began to form. The camera was not a simple soul-stealing device. It was a prison, and its mechanism was memory. It didn't kill its subjects, it displaced them. It took the captured essence of a person and scattered it, embedding their spectral image into the fabric of subsequent moments Elias chose to record. The vanished weren't dead. They were unstuck in time, trapped as silent, eternal observers within the camera's collected light. They were in the dark, just as the bookshelf message had said. The hauntings grew more intense. One evening, as Elias developed a photo of a simple bowl of fruit, the reflection in a single grape showed Sarah's face, a tear rolling down her cheek. Lena, looking over his shoulder, swore she heard a faint whisper on the edge of hearing, a single, drawn-out word, "cold." They started leaving a tape recorder running in the dark room. The playbacks were filled with static, but beneath it, they could discern faint, overlapping murmurs, like the sound of a distant, crowded room. Fragments of sentences emerged. "Can't get out the shutter, always watching." Lena began to change. At first, the changes were subtle. She seemed more tired, more withdrawn. Then, Elias started noticing a strange translucence to her skin in certain lights, as if she were slowly fading. One day, she cut her hand on a piece of broken glass. The bleeding was sluggish, and the wound closed with unnatural speed, leaving behind no scar, only smooth, pale skin. She was becoming less physical, less real. She was becoming a photograph. Her fear was a constant low hum between them, but her resolve never wavered. His guilt, once a paralyzing force, was sharpened into a weapon. He was no longer just the cause of this, he was Lena's only partner in finding a cure. They were a strange, desperate team, the haunted and the soon-to-be haunting, racing against the slow, inexorable click of a cosmic clock. They had less than 3 months left. The end came not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating realization. It was the 11th month since he had taken Lena's picture. She was a pale sketch of her former self, her movements slow, her voice often thin and distant. Sometimes, when she stood by a window, the light seemed to pass directly through her. The whispers from the tape recorder were clearer now, a chorus of pleas. They had tried everything: exorcisms, scientific analysis of the camera's metallurgy, tracking down the descendants of the original owner. Nothing worked. They were in the dark room, the archival box open on the table. The 24 portraits, 23 of his victims, and the one of Lena, stark and terrified wear, laid out in a grid. Elias stared at them, at the faces he had stolen from the world. "It's a vessel," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He picked up the Voigtländer. It felt warm to the touch, humming with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. "It's not a conduit. It's a container. They're not just scattered, they're in here." Lena looked up at him, her gray eyes seeming to hold a light of their own. "What are you saying? My grandfather called it a collector. The debunker talked about emotional residue." "The spirits on the tape talk about being in the dark," Elias said, the pieces clicking into place with horrific clarity. "The curse isn't about vanishing, it's about being gathered. The only way to stop it, to let them go, is to break the vessel." The implications hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Destroy the camera. But what would that do to the souls trapped inside? Would it release them, or would it extinguish them forever, like shattering a light bulb to release the light? "It's a risk," Lena said, her voice steady, even as a tremor ran through her translucent hand. "But what other choice do we have? I'm already gone, Elias. I can feel it. I'm fading. This is the only chance they have. It's the only chance I have." He knew she was right. His role had been to collect them. His penance had to be to set them free, whatever the cost. He looked at the camera, at the lens that had been his eye and his weapon. He saw his own reflection in it, distorted and small. And behind his own face, for just a flicker of a second, he saw them all. Sarah, Marcus, Leoa, multitude of faces staring out from the glass abyss. He built a pyre in the old iron furnace in his basement. He filled it with dry wood and kindling, his movements slow and deliberate, a priest preparing a sacrifice. Lena stood beside him, a shimmering, ethereal presence. She placed her hand on his, and though he could barely feel the physical touch, he felt the warmth of her courage, her final, desperate hope. Together, they held the Voigtländer over the unlit pyre. The camera felt heavier than ever, weighted with the lives it held. Elias looked at the lens one last time. It was no longer a piece of glass, but a gateway, a dark window into a silent, crowded purgatory. He thought of the click of the shutter, the sound that had begun it all. This final act had to be its opposite, not a capture, but a release. He met Lena's gaze. Her form was flickering now, like a faulty projection. A sad, gentle smile touched her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of paper. With a deep breath that felt like his first and his last, he let the camera go. It fell into the heart of the kindling with a dull, metallic thud. He struck a match. The flame flared, a tiny sun in the gloom. He tossed it into the furnace. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a small flame licked at the wood, grew, and the pyre roared to life. The fire consumed the camera, the leather blistering, the metal beginning to glow a dull,